Welcome back to Law and Crime, everybody. I'm Jesse Weber. I got Marie Napoli here with me. We have a lot to cover, so let's get started right now. All right, Marie, we got a powerful closing here, but something didn't work for the state. I mean, when you have 8 hung counts, they're looking back on this and saying, where could we have done more? What could they have done more?
Well, I think there was definitely an issue of credibility with these women. Either the jury found them too theatrical or just not believable. Because having 8 women come forward and say the same story about the same man time and time after again, he should have been convicted. I also think his story about this being a money grab, even though he didn't take the stand, and even though the jury is not supposed to look at the news, invariably they do. And that is something that they may have found credible, especially if you're looking at him, he's a good-looking man, and he doesn't look like a rapist.
The thing is, though, this jury was so careful. I gave this jury credit. They carefully considered each one of the facts. They could have found him guilty when they found him guilty of the forcible rape of one of the Jane Does, Jane Doe number 2. They could have easily said, okay, we find you guilty of sodomy, but they were deadlocked as to that. And it seems like they gave a very careful analysis. And as we get a new jury, I would imagine we want the same thing. What do you think that they were, why do you think that they had these kind of discrepancies? What were the facts that they were missing? Because again, you could have easily had a jury who said, oh, he obviously did this, then he must have done that. What happened here?
Right, I think it also is his credibility as a star. He's a famous football player, and as you know, that goes a long way in communities of knowing him, feeling that they know him, and like him when he was coming into the courtroom. You know, they always say you win and lose a case in jury selection. So we'll see what happens with this next trial.
I'm glad you mentioned that. I'm going to talk about what's happening with jury selection in a minute. I want to play more of the prosecution's closing argument. Again, this is Dan Owens. I'm curious your perspective on this. Look, I have no sympathy lost for, I have no sympathy here for a convicted rapist. I mean, that's what he is. However, does it seem right to you that the prosecution can say to this jury, well, if you think he did this, then you can use that to determine if he did this. If you think he raped Jane Doe number 2, then that can help you guide your decision on Jane Doe number 1. They said that because they realized Jane Doe number 1's testimony was a little bit questionable. Is that fair?
No, of course. And as you know, in criminal law and even civil law, you're not allowed to look at other convictions or other past bad acts to say that they did this act. You don't want them convicting someone because they think they're a bad guy or because of something they've done in the past. And that's a big no-no. And
why was it allowed here?
Well, I think because it was being offered to prove, as he was saying, the facts were intertwined and that they proved each other. And that was an exception to the rule where you can't usually introduce previous convictions or bad acts to prove the case against them there.
Because in other words, some of the Jane Does testified in a more strong way than other Jane Does. And you mentioned it before. Prosecution, do you go back to the Jane Does and say, listen, we looked at your testimony, these were things that maybe weren't so strong, but you can't quite coach their testimony. How does it work?
You can't, no, prosecutors cannot coach testimony, but invariably what they do is tell them what needs to be proved and what their testimony is lacking.
Right.
So although they're not supposed to be coaching their testimony, generally there is some coaching.
So yeah, so we're going to see this new testimony and also a new jury. You'd mentioned before, and I want to give an update right now. We're learning that 172 jurors were summoned for this week, and then we're learning that only 4 were African American. So of the first 86 jurors, or prospective jurors, only 1 was African American, and the defense has an issue with this. They said to have only 1 African American is appalling. It's not representative. What is your thoughts on that?
I would agree with that. I would have the same argument if I was representing him because you're entitled to a jury of your peers. And in this case, the defendant is African American, and he would probably fare well better with an all African American jury.
Well, the question is, what kind of jury do you want in this case as a defense? Because these are serious charges of sexual misconduct and sexual assault of several women. And I guess the question is, what kind of jury members are you looking for? What are the questions you think they're asking right now?
I think you want to have a jury of people that knew him in his days as a football player and had respect for him and were going to give him every benefit of the doubt and weren't going to come in with preconceived notions of guilt because of other allegations being brought against him.
Easier said than done. So
Yes.
we'll have to wait and see who at this jury pool that is selected. I'll tell you what, in the meantime, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to play you the defense's closing argument. Different side. Take a look. We'll be back.